The morning of February 12, 2024, started like any other winter day in Colorado. Construction crews were preparing the grounds for a new luxury resort near the old Devil's Peak area when something unexpected happened. The Avalanche rescue dogs, brought in for routine safety training, suddenly became agitated. They circled a specific spot near what locals knew as an abandoned mining entrance, sealed since the late 1980s. Their persistent barking would lead to one of Colorado's most shocking discoveries in decades. Before we begin the story, write in the comments which city you're from. We're very interested to know where you're watching our video from. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your rating. What the dogs had found would finally answer a question that had haunted 3 families for 33 years. In December 1991, Gerald Brennan, his wife Margaret, and their 17-year-old son Eric had vanished during what was supposed to be a weekend ski trip to one of Colorado's most exclusive resorts. Their disappearance had become one of the state's most enduring mysteries, a case that had frustrated investigators and devastated families for over 3 decades. The Brennan family had been pillars of Denver society in 1991. Gerald, at 44, ran a successful pharmaceutical company that had recently secured several major contracts. Margaret, 41, served on numerous charity boards and was known for her tireless community work. Their son Eric was a senior at a prestigious private school, already accepted to Yale for the following fall. They seemed to have everything: wealth, status, and a bright future ahead. Yet something dark was lurking beneath this perfect surface. 5 days before their disappearance, on December 16, 1991, Gerald had made a disturbing discovery. During a routine review of his company's clinical trial data, he found significant discrepancies. The numbers didn't add up. Someone within his organization was falsifying test results, and the implications were staggering. Gerald spent the next 2 days quietly gathering evidence, telling no one except Margaret about his findings. What he didn't know was that his discreet investigation had already been noticed. On the morning of December 20, 1991, Gerald made an unusual decision. Despite the mounting pressure at work and the concerning discoveries he'd made, he insisted the family needed this ski weekend. Margaret later told her sister during a phone call that Gerald seemed anxious, constantly checking his rearview mirror during the drive to the resort. "He kept saying we all needed to get away, to clear our heads," Margaret had said. Those would be some of the last words her sister would ever hear from her. The Devil's Peak Resort represented everything exclusive about Colorado skiing in the early 1990s. Private slopes, discreet staff, and a clientele that valued privacy above all else. The family checked in at 9 a.m. on December 21st, requesting their usual suite. The desk clerk would later remember that Gerald seemed distracted, barely acknowledging the usual pleasantries. He did, however, make one specific request. He wanted a guide who knew the backcountry trails, someone who could show them areas away from the regular slopes. That guide would be Jake Whitfield, a 24-year-old ski patrol rookie who had recently started at the resort. Jake was eager, helpful, and seemed to know every inch of the mountain. Other staff members described him as almost obsessively dedicated to his job, often volunteering for extra shifts and showing particular interest in the resort's VIP guests. When Gerald Brennan requested a backcountry guide, Jake immediately volunteered, assuring his supervisor he knew the perfect spots for an experienced family of skiers. The morning of December 22nd started with fresh powder and perfect conditions. Security footage from the ski lodge, grainy but still functional, showed the Brennan family meeting Jake at 10:30 a.m. near the equipment rental area. Gerald was carrying something unusual, an old military compass he'd kept from his Army days. Margaret wore her distinctive purple ski jacket, a custom-made piece from a boutique in Vail. Eric had his new Polaroid camera, a recent birthday gift he'd been eager to use on the slopes. What happened over the next several hours would be pieced together through a combination of witness statements, equipment records, and the few physical traces left behind. At 11:45 a.m., the family's ski passes registered at the Summit Express lift. The operator remembered them because Jake had made a comment about showing them the real mountain, not the tourist runs. Gerald had seemed hesitant, but Jake's enthusiasm was infectious. "Your son will love it," Jake had said, gesturing to Eric. "Best powder you'll ever find, and completely untouched." By 2 p.m., other skiers reported seeing the group heading toward the boundary ropes that separated the regular ski area from the backcountry. One witness, a ski instructor from a neighboring resort, thought it odd that Jake was leading them toward the old mining district. "That area's been off limits for years," he would later tell investigators. "Everyone knows about the unstable mine shafts up there." But Jake seemed confident, and the family followed. The last confirmed sighting of the Brennan family alive came at 3 p.m. A Forest Service ranger doing routine avalanche assessment in the area saw 4 figures near the entrance to what he knew as the old Silver Creek mine. He noted it in his log, but thought nothing particularly unusual about it. Backcountry skiing was popular among experienced skiers, and Jake was wearing his ski patrol jacket. The ranger assumed they were doing some kind of official survey. At 4:45 p.m., Jake Whitfield returned to the resort alone. Several employees would later recall that he seemed agitated, his ski patrol jacket torn at the shoulder. He immediately reported that the Brennan family had decided to take one more run while he returned to attend to other duties. This wasn't unusual. Guides often left experienced skiers to enjoy the slopes on their own. But when the family failed to return their rental equipment by closing time at 6 p.m., the first alarms were raised. Jake was the first to volunteer for the search party. He seemed genuinely concerned, providing detailed maps of where he'd taken the family and suggesting search patterns for the rescue teams. His knowledge of the mountain was invaluable, other searchers would later recall. He worked tirelessly through the night, directing teams to various locations, always seeming to be one step ahead of where everyone else thought to look. "He was incredible," one rescue coordinator remembered. "It was like he could predict where we'd want to search next." The family's rental car was discovered 3 days later, still parked at the resort. Inside, investigators found wrapped Christmas presents in the back seat, Margaret's purse with her wallet still inside, and Gerald's briefcase containing documents from his pharmaceutical company. There was also something else, a dictaphone, the kind executives used in the early 1990s for recording notes. The tape inside would later prove crucial, though its significance wouldn't be understood for decades. As news of the disappearance spread, theories began to emerge. The most prominent involved Viktor Petrov, a Russian investor who had been trying to partner with Gerald's pharmaceutical company. Viktor had arrived in Denver just 2 days before the family's disappearance, checking into the Brown Palace Hotel under an assumed name. Hotel records showed he had made numerous calls to Gerald's office, each one increasingly aggressive, according to Gerald's secretary. When questioned, Viktor claimed he had been trying to close a legitimate business deal, but investigators found his story full of holes. Viktor's alleged connection to the Russian pharmaceutical black market made him an immediate suspect. The DEA had been monitoring his activities for months, suspecting he was using legitimate pharmaceutical companies to launder money from illegal drug operations. Gerald's company, with its recent expansion and new government contracts, would have been a perfect front. The theory was that Gerald had discovered Viktor's true intentions and threatened to go to the authorities, giving Viktor a clear motive for wanting the family silenced. Then there was Carla Espinoza, the 31-year-old resort manager who had been on duty when the Brennans checked in. Carla had worked at Devil's Peak for 5 years, building a reputation as an efficient and discreet manager who understood the importance of guest privacy. But investigators discovered she had been living well beyond her means. Her bank records showed deposits that couldn't be explained by her salary, and she had recently purchased a condo in Aspen that should have been far outside her price range. The investigation revealed that Carla had been embezzling from the resort for at least 2 years, using her position to skim from cash transactions and manipulate the books. If Gerald, with his business acumen and attention to detail, had noticed something amiss during his stay, it could have meant the end of her scheme. Several employees mentioned that Carla had seemed particularly nervous around the Brennans, constantly checking on their room and asking staff about their activities. But it was Jake Whitfield who drew the most sustained attention from investigators, though not for the reasons one might expect. Everyone praised his dedication to the search efforts. He had provided detailed maps, suggested search patterns, and worked 18-hour days trying to find the missing family. He was the hero of the story, the young ski patrol officer who wouldn't give up hope. Local news featured him prominently, and he received commendations for his efforts. Yet certain details didn't quite add up. Jake's Avalanche transceiver, a crucial piece of safety equipment for backcountry skiing, showed unusual activity patterns on the day of the disappearance. The device, which broadcasts a signal that can be detected by other transceivers in case of an avalanche, had been turned off and on multiple times between 3 p.m. and 4 p.m. This was highly unusual. Safety protocol demanded the devices remain on continuously during backcountry excursions. There was also the matter of the dictaphone found in Gerald's car. The recording was mostly routine business notes, but near the end there was something strange. Gerald could be heard discussing what sounded like a chemical formula with someone. The audio was poor, but forensic experts identified terms related to synthetic drug production. The other voice on the recording was young, male, and seemed knowledgeable about chemistry. Investigators assumed it was related to Gerald's pharmaceutical work, but the context seemed off. As weeks turned to months and months to years, the case grew cold. The official theory was that the family had suffered a tragic accident, possibly caught in an avalanche or falling into one of the many unmarked mine shafts in the area. The resort increased its safety measures, the boundaries were more clearly marked, and Jake Whitfield was promoted for his tireless search efforts. He eventually left Colorado, moving to Montana, where he started a successful outdoor adventure company. Viktor Petrov returned to Russia after being questioned, his business deals in America falling apart after the scrutiny from the investigation. Carla Espinoza was quietly let go from the resort after her embezzlement was discovered, though charges were never filed. The resort wanted to avoid the scandal. She moved to Phoenix and started over, eventually opening a small travel agency. Life moved on, and the Brennan family tragedy became another unsolved mystery in Colorado's history. Gerald's mother, Ruth Brennan, never gave up hope. Even into her 90s, she maintained that her son's family hadn't simply vanished in an accident. She kept pressing authorities to reopen the case, hiring private investigators with her own money, and maintaining a website dedicated to finding the truth. Most people thought she was a grieving mother unable to accept reality, but Ruth insisted something more sinister had happened to her family. The breakthrough that would crack the case came from an unexpected source. In 2023, Jake Whitfield, now 56 and running a successful adventure tourism company in Montana, was arrested for drug trafficking. Federal agents had been investigating a methamphetamine distribution network that used outdoor recreation businesses as fronts, and Jake's company had emerged as a key player. During the raid on his property, agents discovered something that immediately triggered alarm bells: detailed maps of Colorado mine systems from the 1990s, including the Devil's Peak area. What made these maps significant wasn't just their existence, but the notations Jake had made on them. There were dates, chemical formulas, and delivery schedules dating back to 1991. The DEA realized they had stumbled onto something much bigger than a current drug operation. Jake had been using abandoned mine shafts as drug laboratories and storage facilities for over 3 decades, starting when he was just a young ski patrol officer at Devil's Peak Resort. The investigation into Jake's current activities revealed a pattern that stretched back to his early days in Colorado. Former associates, given immunity in exchange for testimony, described how Jake had discovered that the abandoned mines around Devil's Peak provided perfect cover for cooking methamphetamine. The remote locations, stable temperatures, and lack of oversight made them ideal. He would guide unsuspecting tourists near these areas as cover for checking on his operations, using his ski patrol credentials to move freely across restricted terrain. One former partner, arrested on unrelated charges, provided crucial information about December 1991. He revealed that Jake had been paranoid that month about someone discovering his laboratory in the Silver Creek mine. Jake had mentioned a pharmaceutical executive who was asking too many questions, someone who understood chemistry and had recognized the significance of certain chemical odors near the mine entrances. The partner remembered Jake saying he needed to handle the situation permanently. This testimony prompted Colorado authorities to reopen the Brennan case with new focus. They obtained Jake's Avalanche transceiver records from 1991, which had been archived by the resort. Advanced analysis showed that Jake's device had been stationary near the Silver Creek mine for 47 minutes on December 22, 1991. Far longer than would be needed for a simple backcountry tour. More damning, the transceivers that the Brennan family had been wearing, which should have been broadcasting continuously, had all stopped transmitting simultaneously at 3:32 p.m. Investigators also re-examined the dictaphone recording from Gerald's car with modern audio enhancement technology. What they discovered changed everything. The conversation about chemical formulas wasn't about pharmaceutical products. It was Gerald confronting someone about the smell of methamphetamine precursors. The young male voice, previously unidentified, was now clearly recognizable as Jake Whitfield. Gerald could be heard saying, "I know what you're doing up here. Those aren't mining chemicals I'm smelling." Jake's response was partially audible. "You don't understand. Too much at stake." The recording had been made on December 21st, the day before the family disappeared. Gerald had apparently confronted Jake privately, possibly hoping to give the young man a chance to explain or cease his activities. This confrontation sealed the family's fate. Jake couldn't allow a pharmaceutical executive with knowledge of chemistry and connections to law enforcement to leave the mountain with this information. The stakes were too high. His operation was generating hundreds of thousands of dollars monthly. Forensic accountants discovered that Jake had been laundering his drug money through a complex series of transactions, eventually investing in legitimate businesses. His outdoor adventure company in Montana was built entirely on profits from his drug operations. They traced deposits made in December 1991 that corresponded exactly with what would have been a major methamphetamine sale, suggesting Jake's operation was already substantial when the Brennans stumbled upon it. The investigation revealed that Jake had methodically planned the family's disappearance. He had volunteered to guide them specifically because Gerald had been asking questions about the chemical smells on the mountain. By taking them to the remote mine area, he could control the situation completely. The torn ski patrol jacket he wore when returning alone wasn't from an accident. Forensics found trace evidence suggesting it had been deliberately damaged to support his story of a struggle with difficult terrain. What made Jake's deception so effective was his performance in the aftermath. By leading search efforts, he could direct teams away from the actual location while appearing heroic. Every time someone suggested searching near the Silver Creek mine, Jake would have a logical reason why the family couldn't have gone there: unstable snow conditions, equipment limitations, or witness sightings elsewhere. His intimate knowledge of the mountain made his misdirection seem like expert guidance. Former colleagues remembered details that now took on sinister significance. Jake had insisted on checking certain areas personally, always alone, claiming his experience made him more efficient. He had vehemently opposed using heat-sensing equipment near the mine shafts, arguing it would be ineffective due to the thermal properties of the underground structures. Every decision he made during those search efforts was calculated to prevent discovery while maintaining his image as a dedicated rescuer. The DEA's investigation revealed that Jake's drug operation had continued to evolve after 1991. He had used the Brennan family's disappearance as a cautionary tale to keep other curious skiers away from his territory. "Remember what happened to that family that went off trail," became a common warning at the resort. Jake had turned his crime into a ghost story that protected his ongoing operations. The mines remained his personal drug laboratory for another 5 years before he moved his operation to Montana. Interviews with Jake's associates painted a picture of a man who had grown increasingly paranoid over the years. He rarely spoke about his time in Colorado, but when drunk, he would sometimes mention the pharmaceutical executive who almost ruined everything. One associate recalled Jake saying, "Some people are too smart for their own good. They see things they shouldn't see, understand things they shouldn't understand." These comments had seemed like philosophical musings at the time, but now appeared to be veiled confessions. The technological advances since 1991 provided new tools for investigation. Satellite imagery from the early 1990s, now enhanced with modern processing, showed heat signatures from the mine that suggested chemical cooking operations. Ground-penetrating radar revealed passages in the mine system that hadn't been mapped, areas that Jake had likely used for his laboratory. Environmental testing found residual chemical contamination consistent with decades-old methamphetamine production. Meanwhile, Viktor Petrov was located in Moscow and interviewed via video conference. He admitted to trying to pressure Gerald into a business deal, but denied any involvement in the disappearance. His alibi was solid. Credit card records and witness statements placed him in Denver during the crucial time period. He had been a convenient suspect, his suspicious behavior drawing attention away from the real perpetrator. Jake had likely been aware of Victor's presence and used it to his advantage. Carla Espinoza, now living quietly in Phoenix, was also re-interviewed. She broke down when told about the new developments, admitting she had suspected Jake was involved in something illegal but had been too afraid to speak up. She revealed that Jake had discovered her embezzlement and used it as leverage to ensure her silence. He had told her that if she ever mentioned his activities, he would expose her theft. For 33 years, she had lived with the guilt of her silence. The search for physical evidence led investigators back to the Devil's Peak area in January 2024. Using Jake's own maps, seized from his Montana property, they identified specific locations within the mine system. The entrance that had been sealed since the late 1980s showed signs of having been reopened and resealed multiple times. When investigators finally breached it, they found Jake's abandoned laboratory, complete with chemical equipment from the early 1990s. But it was the Avalanche dogs during that February training exercise that made the crucial discovery. Following their instincts, the dogs led handlers to a section of the mine that had been walled off with rocks and concrete. The seal was professional, suggesting someone with construction knowledge had created it. When investigators carefully removed the barrier, they found a chamber that had been hidden for 33 years. Inside was evidence that would finally provide answers to the Brennan family's fate. The chamber contained personal effects that definitively belonged to the family. Gerald's military compass, still pointing toward magnetic north despite the decades. Margaret's purple ski jacket, folded neatly as if someone had taken care to preserve it. And Eric's Polaroid camera, its film long since degraded, but the device itself intact. There were also 3 Avalanche transceivers, their batteries long dead, but their serial numbers matching the equipment rented on that fatal day. Forensic anthropologists were called in to examine additional evidence found in the chamber. Without going into graphic details, they confirmed that this was where the Brennan family's journey had ended. The positioning and preservation suggested that Jake had acted quickly to conceal evidence of his crime. The professional nature of the concealment indicated he had planned for this possibility, having materials ready to seal the chamber permanently. Among the evidence was something unexpected, a notebook in Jake's handwriting, apparently a log of his drug operations. One entry, dated December 22, 1991, simply read, Problem solved. Site temporarily closed. Resume operations in spring. This casual reference to ending 3 lives showed the cold calculation behind Jake's actions. To him, the Brennans were simply an obstacle to his business, a problem to be managed and eliminated. The arrest of Jake Whitfield in Montana made national headlines. The man who had been hailed as a hero for his tireless search efforts was now revealed as the very person responsible for the family's disappearance. The image of the dedicated young ski patrol officer was replaced by that of a calculating killer who had used the tragedy he created to build his reputation and protect his criminal enterprise. The betrayal felt by the Devil's Peak community was profound. When confronted with the evidence in February 2024, Jake initially maintained his innocence. He claimed the maps were for legitimate backcountry guide work, that the chemical equipment in the mine was planted, and that he had no knowledge of what happened to the Brennan family beyond what he had told investigators in 1991. But as prosecutors laid out their case piece by piece, his denials began to crumble. The dictaphone recording, enhanced with modern technology, was particularly damning. The turning point came when investigators played Jake the full enhanced recording from Gerald's dictaphone. Hearing Gerald's voice again after 33 years, clear and accusing, describing the chemical smells and confronting him about the drug operation, Jake's composure finally broke. His attorney would later describe watching his client age 10 years in 10 minutes, the weight of 3 decades of deception finally crushing him. After a long silence, Jake asked to speak with prosecutors about a plea deal. In his confession, Jake revealed the full extent of what happened on December 22, 1991. After Gerald had confronted him the previous day, Jake knew he had to act. He couldn't let the family leave the mountain with knowledge of his operation. He had suggested the backcountry tour as a way to isolate them, leading them to the Silver Creek mine under the pretense of showing them a historical site. Once there, events had unfolded quickly. Jake insisted the family had threatened to destroy his life, though prosecutors noted this was simply his attempt to rationalize murder. What Jake revealed next shocked even seasoned investigators. The Brennan family weren't his only victims. Over the years, there had been 2 other accidental disappearances on the mountain. A solo hiker in 1993 who had stumbled upon his expanded operation, and a couple in 1995 who had been asking too many questions about chemical shipments to the resort. Both cases had been classified as tragic accidents, victims of the mountain's unforgiving terrain. Jake had been involved in both search efforts, once again playing the dedicated rescuer while concealing his crimes. The investigation expanded to include these additional cases. Families who had spent decades wondering what happened to their loved ones finally had answers, though the truth was more horrible than any accident could have been. Jake's drug operation had claimed at least 6 lives over the years, all people who had inadvertently discovered his secret and paid the ultimate price for their curiosity or bad timing. Each time, Jake had used the same pattern: volunteer for the search, misdirect efforts, and maintain his image as a hero. Jake's Montana operation revealed the full scope of his criminal empire. What had started as a small methamphetamine lab in an abandoned Colorado mine had evolved into a multi-state drug network generating millions in revenue. The outdoor adventure company was just one of several fronts. He owned restaurants, equipment rental shops, and even a small aviation company, all built on the profits from drugs and paid for with the lives of innocent people who had gotten too close to his secret. The legal proceedings moved swiftly once Jake's confession was secured. Prosecutors charged him with 3 counts of first-degree murder for the Brennan family, 2 additional counts for the other victims, and numerous federal drug charges. The death penalty was off the table due to Jake's cooperation in revealing the locations of all victims, allowing families to finally have closure. Instead, he faced life in prison without the possibility of parole, a sentence that would ensure he never walked free again. During the sentencing hearing, the families of the victims had their chance to confront Jake. Ruth Brennan, now 94 years old, had lived just long enough to see her son's killer brought to justice. She was wheeled into the courtroom, frail but determined. When she spoke, her voice was clear and strong. "You stole my son, my daughter-in-law, and my grandson. You stole 33 years of truth from me. I forgive you, not for your sake, but for mine. But I hope you spend every remaining day of your life remembering their faces." Eric Brennan's girlfriend from 1991, now a grandmother herself, testified about the promising young man whose life was cut short. She had kept his letters, his photos, his dreams of becoming an engineer. She described how his disappearance had haunted her, how she had never fully trusted anyone again, how every relationship had been shadowed by the trauma of losing someone who simply vanished. Jake sat unmoved through most of the testimony, but witnesses noticed him flinch when she read one of Eric's last letters about looking forward to their future together. The impact on the Devil's Peak Resort and the surrounding community was substantial. The resort, which had traded on its exclusive reputation and pristine safety record, faced numerous lawsuits from the families. Questions arose about how Jake had been able to use his position for criminal activities without detection. The resort eventually settled out of court, establishing a memorial fund for the victims and implementing stringent new background checks and monitoring systems for all employees with mountain access. The environmental cleanup of the mine system revealed the extent of the chemical contamination from Jake's drug operations. The EPA designated it as a priority cleanup site, estimating it would take years and millions of dollars to fully remediate the damage. The pristine mountain ecosystem had been poisoned by decades of chemical runoff from methamphetamine production. Wildlife in the area showed signs of contamination, and several natural springs had to be permanently closed to public access. Former colleagues of Jake struggled to reconcile the man they thought they knew with the monster he was revealed to be. Many described experiencing a form of collective trauma, questioning their own judgment and memories. The ski patrol team at Devil's Peak underwent counseling, grappling with the fact that they had worked alongside a killer, had trusted him with their lives on dangerous rescues, had considered him a friend and mentor. Several retired early, unable to continue in a profession now tainted by association. The case prompted a comprehensive review of cold cases throughout Colorado and neighboring states. Investigators wondered how many other accidents in remote areas might actually be homicides. The FBI created a task force to examine disappearances near abandoned mines and remote recreational areas, looking for patterns that might indicate other criminal operations hidden in America's wilderness. Several cases were reopened, though none showed the clear pattern of Jake's crimes. Jake's confession also revealed the network of people who had unknowingly aided his operations over the years. Suppliers who thought they were selling chemicals for legitimate mining operations, transporters who believed they were moving industrial equipment, even resort employees who had inadvertently provided cover for his activities. None were criminally liable, but many struggled with the guilt of their unwitting participation in Jake's enterprise. Support groups formed for these secondary victims of Jake's deception. The pharmaceutical company Gerald Brennan had built survived, though it never fully recovered from the loss of its founder. Gerald's brother had taken over operations, maintaining it as a family business in honor of Gerald's memory. When the truth about Gerald's death was revealed, the company established a whistleblower program and ethics hotline, ensuring that employees who discovered wrongdoing would have safe channels to report it. They named it the Gerald Brennan Integrity Initiative. In an ironic twist, the enhancement of the dictaphone recording that had helped convict Jake also revealed something else: Gerald's own research notes about a revolutionary pain medication that didn't carry the risk of addiction. His formulas, preserved on that tape for 33 years, were studied by his company's current scientists. They successfully developed the medication, which received FDA approval in late 2024. It was named GB 1991 in Gerald's honor, ensuring his scientific legacy lived on despite Jake's attempts to silence him. The discovery brought unexpected connections to light. One of the investigators working the case revealed that his own brother had died from methamphetamine addiction in the late 1990s, likely from drugs that originated in Jake's labs. The prosecutor's daughter had been a student with Eric Brennan, remembering him as the boy who had helped her with calculus. The Avalanche dog handler who had found the crucial evidence had grown up hearing stories about the missing family from his grandfather, who had participated in the original search. The case had touched countless lives across decades. Jake's mother, still alive at 83, gave a single interview after her son's conviction. She described a bright, ambitious boy who had gradually changed after moving to Colorado. She blamed herself for not seeing the signs, for not questioning his sudden wealth, for believing his stories about successful business ventures. Her grief was complex, mourning the son she had lost to greed and violence while grappling with the horror of what he had done to other families. She ended the interview by apologizing to the victims' families, though she acknowledged no apology could undo the damage. The final piece of the puzzle came from Jake himself during a prison interview with a forensic psychiatrist. He revealed that his father had died in a mining accident when Jake was 12, leaving the family in poverty. He had sworn to never be poor again, to find a way to make money from the mountains that had taken his father. The abandoned mines had seemed like poetic justice, turning sites of tragedy into sources of wealth. The psychiatrist noted that Jake showed signs of antisocial personality disorder, viewing people as obstacles rather than human beings. As the case concluded, attention turned to preventing similar tragedies. New legislation was passed requiring regular inspections of abandoned mines, increased monitoring of chemical sales that could be used in drug production, and mandatory background checks for anyone working in positions with access to remote areas. The Brennan family law became a model for other states dealing with the intersection of outdoor recreation and hidden criminal activity. The remains of all victims were finally returned to their families for proper burial. The Brennan family was laid to rest together in a Denver cemetery, their headstones bearing the dates of their death as December 22, 1991, finally providing the closure that had been denied for 33 years. The ceremony was attended by hundreds, including many who had participated in the original search, finally able to mourn properly, knowing the truth. Ruth Brennan passed away 3 weeks after the funeral, having lived just long enough to see justice served and her family properly laid to rest. Her obituary noted that she had never given up hope, never stopped fighting for the truth, and had been vindicated in her belief that her family's disappearance was more than a tragic accident. She was buried next to her son, her final rest coming only after she had ensured his story was fully told. The Devil's Peak area was eventually reopened to skiing, though the Silver Creek mine entrance was permanently sealed with a memorial plaque for the victims. Every year on December 22nd, the resort holds a moment of silence at 3:32 p.m., the time when the Brennan family's transceivers had stopped transmitting. It serves as a reminder that evil can hide behind the most helpful faces, and that the pursuit of truth, no matter how long it takes, is always worthwhile. In a final irony, Jake's outdoor adventure company in Montana was liquidated, with all proceeds going to a victim compensation fund. The business he had built on blood money would now serve to help the families he had destroyed. His properties were sold, his assets seized, and every penny traced back to drug money was recovered. The millions he had accumulated over 33 years of crime would be distributed to drug rehabilitation programs and victim support services. The case became a textbook study in criminal psychology and investigative persistence. FBI training now includes a module on the Brennan case, teaching new agents how criminals can hide in plain sight, how heroic behavior can be a mask for guilt, and how time doesn't diminish the importance of solving cold cases. Jake Whitfield became the cautionary tale he had never intended to be, proof that no crime stays hidden forever, and that justice, though delayed, will eventually prevail. The last words belong to Sarah Henderson, Gerald's sister, who had been too sick to join the fatal ski trip. Now, in her 70s, she reflected on how a case of flu had saved her life. "I spent 33 years wondering if I could have changed things if I had been there," she said. "Now I know the answer. Jake would have killed me too. My brother discovered a monster's secret and paid the ultimate price for it. But Gerald always stood up for what was right, even when it was dangerous. In the end, his courage in confronting Jake is what solved this case. That dictaphone recording was his testimony from beyond the grave." The Brennan case officially closed on March 1, 2024, exactly 33 years, 2 months, and 8 days after the family vanished on a Colorado mountainside. Justice had finally been served, though it could never undo the decades of pain, the lives cut short, or the innocence lost. In the end, it was a testament to the persistence of truth and the unending love of families who refused to let their loved ones be forgotten. The mountains that had hidden Jake's crimes for so long had finally given up their secrets, and the Brennan family could finally rest in peace.